Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time we're exploring Dave Pelzer's Too Close to Me. It's kind of a follow-up to his really intense earlier book, A Child Called It.
Oh, yeah, A Child Called It. I remember that one.
Yeah, it's huge, right?
Huge impact. Really changed how we talk about child abuse.
Exactly. So in Too Close to Me, he kind of picks up where A Child Called It left off. But this time, it's about what happens after you share that kind of story with the whole world.
Like the after effects.
Exactly. The things people don't always see.
It makes you think, right? Like
Yeah.
you'd assume sharing a story like that would be empowering, getting it out there.
Right.
But Pelzer really shows us how it can be well, some have called it a double-edged sword.
Okay, so what does that mean? Double-edged sword in this context.
Well, it means there can be consequences to going public with something so personal. It's not just about your healing anymore.
It's like everyone else gets involved.
Yeah, you're dealing with societal expectations too.
Yeah.
Pelzer even talks about feeling like a symbol, not a person.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that.
That's got to be tough to carry that kind of weight.
And he even talks about how it affected his everyday life, right?
Mm.
Like strangers coming up to him asking super personal questions.
Oh, yeah. Like, it was okay because he'd share his story. His whole story was fair game.
Yeah. Like his private life wasn't his anymore.
And that's where boundaries come in, I guess.
Boundaries.
Yeah, like, it's great to reclaim your power by sharing your story, but you also have to set limits, right?
To protect yourself.
Exactly. Protect your emotional well-being, even when, especially when you're trying to help others.
It's tricky, right?
Right.
Because you want to help.
Yeah, it is.
He has this metaphor in the book. It's kind of sad, but he talks about feeling like a zoo animal.
Always on display.
Yeah, always on display. And people forget that he's just, well, he's a person.
Right. Not just some symbol.
Yeah, not just a symbol of resilience. He's got a complex life, too.
Makes you think about how we treat survivors, right?
We do.
Like society, I mean. Like, we put them on a pedestal, expect them to be perfect.
Role models.
Yeah, role models all the time. But they're still just people going through their own stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And healing doesn't always look pretty, right?
Right. Okay, so then there's the whole relationship thing,
Relationships.
like, with other people. Makes sense that going through that level of trauma would mess with your ability to connect.
Definitely.
But how does it actually play out in Too Close to Me? Like, what does he say?
He doesn't hold back at all. He's really honest about his struggles,
About what?
about being vulnerable, about letting people in. He even says he pushes people away.
Even people he loves.
Even people he loves out of fear.
I remember this one part. He's talking about his wife at the time, and she's trying to comfort him during a panic attack, and he just completely shuts down.
He couldn't handle it.
Yeah, like her kindness was too much, too exposing.
And that's trauma, right? Like, that's how it affects intimacy. And not just romantic relationships either. He talks about friends too, and just trusting people in general.
Like he built all these walls,
Walls to protect himself.
but they also kept him isolated.
It makes you think though, right? Like, how much do our past experiences, even the little things, mess with our relationships now?
That's a good question. Something to think about.
And then, of course, he becomes a father.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, it's not just his trauma anymore.
He doesn't want to pass it on.
Exactly. He's terrified of repeating the cycle.
Yeah, but it's not just about, not being abusive.
Right.
He talks about struggling to be emotionally there for his son.
That makes sense. After spending so long pushing down his feelings, he didn't know how to just express them.
Especially love and affection.
It's something a lot of parents can relate to, I think.
Even ones who haven't been through what he went through.
Exactly.
I remember he talks about being physically present, like playing games with his son. But emotionally, he wasn't there.
Just going through the motions?
Yeah, like he was disconnected.
And this goes back to healing, right? It's not just about fixing the past, it's about learning how to be different in the present.
So Pelzer had to learn to be a different kind of parent.
Consciously learn it.
Wow.
Create a healthy environment, one that he never had.
Sounds exhausting. Like fighting against yourself all the time.
It's hard work.
It is.
Oh, yeah. But it shows that we can change those patterns. We don't have to repeat them.
Okay, so we've got healing from his own past, being a dad, and then he gets into advocacy work.
Right, trying to help others who've been through similar things.
But was that good for him?
Well, that's the other edge of the sword. Advocacy is so important, but it can be really draining.
Especially for someone like him.
Yeah, someone who's still processing their own trauma.
He talks about feeling burned out
Yeah, overwhelmed.
by all the people asking for help, all the expectations.
So again, it comes back to self-care, Pelzer had to learn to set boundaries, even when his work was about helping others.
And he says no sometimes.
He had to learn to.
Yeah.
We can't help anyone if we're running on empty, right?
Right. Okay, so last big theme, I think, forgiveness.
That's a tough one.
Huge, right. Especially with what he went through.
But Too Close to Me doesn't try to simplify it.
Meaning?
Meaning, Pelzer doesn't pretend it's easy. Or that it just happens and everything's fine.
It's a process.
It's a process, yeah.
Uh-huh.
A messy one. And sometimes it hurts.
And it doesn't always have a clear ending.
Not necessarily, no.
He even says he still feels angry.
At his abuser.
Yeah, even after all these years. And he talks about guilt, regret. Like he should have done something different.
But what's so insightful is how he challenges what we think forgiveness means.
Meaning?
Like, it's not about saying it was okay what happened to him.
It's not about condoning it.
Right. It's more about moving forward without letting the past control you, without letting the anger eat you up.
So forgiveness is about him.
In a way, yes. About finding peace within yourself, whether the abuser ever admits to anything or not.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It is. And it's not a one-time thing. He describes it as a wave.
A wave.
Yeah, like sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's barely there. You're constantly negotiating with yourself, with what happened.
It sounds really hard.
It is. But that's the reality of healing. It's not a straight line. It's
Yeah.
more like a spiral. You move forward, then back a little, then forward again.
Yeah, that's okay.
It is. It's about being patient,
Mhm.
letting yourself feel everything. Forgiveness, that's the way Pelzer talks about it. It's like choosing peace, even when it feels impossible.
Wow. That's a lot to think about.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface of Too Close to Me.
There's more.
Oh yeah, there's so much more to unpack.
I can't wait.
And it's that honesty that really gets you, that raw emotion.
Yeah, it's like he's not trying to sugarcoat anything.
Not at all. He's not giving us that whole closure thing, like forgiveness just happens and you move on.
It's more complicated than that.
Way more. It's not a one-time thing. He actually says it's a practice.
A practice.
It's something you have to keep working at.
Every day.
He says some days it's there, other days it's gone.
I guess that makes sense.
It does, right? Because healing, it's not a straight line.
More like a roller coaster.
He says it's cyclical, like you have good days and bad days.
You can still be messed up even years later.
He says the scars are always there.
But they don't have to control you.
Exactly. You can still live a good life.
But it's hard. Right.
Oh, it's definitely hard.
Especially for men. I feel like we're not supposed to talk about this stuff.
There's that whole be strong thing.
Yeah, like showing your feelings is weak.
But Pelzer, he's really pushing back against that.
Oh?
He talks about going to therapy, about how hard it was for him to open up.
You mean to talk about his feelings?
Yeah, all of it. The anger, the sadness, everything.
But that's good, right? That he was able to do that.
It is. It shows that it's okay to ask for help.
That you don't have to go through it alone.
Exactly. And it challenges that whole resilient label.
What do you mean?
Like, we call survivors resilient, but sometimes it's like we expect them to be okay.
Just bounce back and be fine.
Yeah, like they're not allowed to struggle.
Which isn't fair.
No, it's not.
All right.
And it can make it harder for them to reach out for help.
So Too Close to Me is saying it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And that real strength is about admitting you need help.
And he also says that healing, it's not linear.
Meaning?
Like he thought he was over it,
Yeah.
but then something would happen.
And it would all come back.
Yeah, like a trigger.
Trauma can do that.
Even years later.
It can. It stays with you.
So you're never really cured.
He says it's a lifelong journey.
I guess that makes sense.
It does, right? And it's different for everyone.
But there are things that can make it harder. Like
Yes.
becoming a parent. He talks about that a lot.
Yeah. Suddenly you're responsible for another human being.
And you don't want to mess him up.
Especially if you had a bad childhood yourself.
He was terrified of repeating the cycle.
Absolutely. He didn't want to hurt his son.
But it wasn't just about physical abuse.
Right. He also struggled with being emotionally present.
It was showing love.
Yeah. He'd spent so long shutting down his emotions.
So it was hard to connect with his son.
On a deeper level, yeah.
But he tried, right?
He did. He talks about learning new parenting techniques.
Like consciously trying to be different.
Exactly. Breaking the cycle.
And that's possible.
He says it is. It takes work. But we can choose a different path.
Even if we had a bad childhood.
We're not doomed to repeat the past.
That's good to hear.
It is, right. And it applies to everything, not just parenting.
So there's hope.
There's always hope. We just have to be willing to work for it.
You know, it's amazing to me how even though Pelzer's story is so intense, so specific to him, There's something in Too Close to Me that I think almost anyone can connect with.
Yeah, the themes are really universal, aren't they?
It's like, yeah, okay, his experiences were extreme, but the stuff he talks about wanting to connect with people, feeling like you have to be strong all the time, trying to forgive, we all deal with that on some level.
It makes you realize we're not that different, even if our lives are different.
We've all got our own baggage, right?
Definitely. Our own ways of coping.
And that's kind of what makes Pelzer's book so powerful. It reminds us we're not alone. In our pain, I mean.
He really takes away some of the stigma, you know?
The stigma of trauma.
Yeah, he shows what being a survivor really looks like, the messy parts.
And he doesn't buy into that whole resilience myth.
Resilience, maybe?
Yeah, like just because someone survived, we expect them to be, I don't know, fine. Like just get over it and move on.
But he's honest about the work it takes, the constant effort.
And how it's not about forgetting. It's about, I don't know, integrating what happened.
Making it part of who you are, but not letting it define you.
Exactly. And that's resilience, I think.
Yeah.
Real resilience, not pretending it didn't happen.
And that's so important, especially for men.
Because
We're taught to bottle it up, you know? Be tough, don't complain. So to see Pelzer being so open about his struggles, about therapy,
it's kind of groundbreaking.
it is. It gives
Yeah.
other guys permission to feel things.
Yeah, permission to be human.
And that asking for help, that's not weak.
It takes more strength to admit you need it.
Way more.
And Too Close to Me. It's like a reminder that we need each other.
We do. To listen, to support.
And when we share our stories.
It creates space for healing.
Yeah, it really does. So as we wrap this up, I think the big thing I'm taking away from Too Close to Me is that healing, it's not a finish line,
It's a journey
a long one.
with a lot of twists and turns.
But ups and downs.
But even though it's hard and it takes time,
It's possible.
it is. We just have to be patient with ourselves, mostly.
And not be afraid to ask for help.
Exactly.
Well, this has been amazing. Thanks for all your insights.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Too Close to Me. I hope it's given you some things to think about, maybe even spark some conversations.
And if you're out there struggling, please remember you're not alone. Reach out. There's help. There's always hope.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring what it means to be human.